everyone believed I was living a dream. My name is Aria Ashwyn, the only heir to Ashwyn Corporation, one of the country's most powerful business empires. From luxury hotels to cutting-edge technology, my family's company had spent decades building a legacy admired by millions. To the world, I had wealth, success, and a future anyone would envy. But sometimes the most beautiful lives hide the darkest endings. After losing my parents, I inherited the company at just 26 years old. Many people doubted whether someone so young could lead such a massive corporation, but I was determined to prove them wrong. I worked tirelessly, not for fame or money, but to protect the legacy my parents had entrusted to me. I believed that if I treated people with honesty and kindness, they would stand by me no matter what. Looking back, that was the biggest mistake I ever made. Like every other morning, my desk was covered with contracts waiting for my signature. My legal team and trusted executives had already reviewed every document, so I signed them without a second thought. I never imagined that hidden among those papers were documents that would slowly take my company away from me. One signature. One simple decision. That was all it took for fate to begin rewriting my future. Then there was Adrian Cross. The man I believed would become my husband. He always knew how to make me smile after a long day. Whenever work became overwhelming, he reminded me that I wasn't carrying the burden alone. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the city skyline, he gently placed his jacket over my shoulders. I smiled because I truly believed I had found someone who loved me for who I was, not because I was the CEO, not because I was an heiress, just because I was Aria. But while I dreamed about our future together, Adrian was already meeting someone behind my back. Inside a private room at one of the city's most luxurious restaurants, someone was waiting for him. It wasn't a business partner. It wasn't a client. It was Evelyn Hart, my childhood best friend. The woman I trusted like family. As they quietly discussed confidential company documents over dinner, I had no idea the two people I trusted most were hiding a secret from me. Days passed, and everything seemed perfectly normal. I continued leading the company, attending meetings, and planning for the future. What I didn't realize was that every document I approved gave Adrian and his allies a little more influence inside Ashwyn Corporation. I trusted the people around me completely, never realizing that trust was becoming my greatest weakness. Evelyn never acted like my enemy. She helped me prepare for company events. She stood beside me during interviews. She celebrated every achievement with a smile. She looked like the kind of friend everyone wished they had. I never questioned her intentions because I believed true friendship could never be faked. A few days later, the city gathered to celebrate our engagement. The ballroom was filled with influential guests, glittering chandeliers, and endless congratulations. Standing beside Adrian, I truly believed I was about to begin the happiest chapter of my life. I had a successful career, a loving fiancé, and my closest friend celebrating beside me. Everything felt perfect. But perfect moments never last forever. Later that night, Adrian sent me a simple message. Meet me on the rooftop. I smiled as I walked toward the elevator, completely unaware that it would be the last time I smiled as the old Aria Ashwyn. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped onto the rooftop expecting a romantic surprise. Instead, I found Adrian standing alone in the pouring rain. He looked at me with a cold expression I had never seen before. The warmth in his eyes had disappeared completely. Before I could ask what was wrong, Evelyn stepped out from the shadows and walked to Adrian's side. My heart sank as I looked at the two people I trusted most. Adrian smiled and calmly admitted that he had never loved me. He said getting close to me had always been part of his plan. Every smile, every promise, every "I love you" had been nothing more than a lie. Then Evelyn confessed that she had been helping him from the very beginning. The contracts I had signed, the confidential information I had trusted her with, and even our engagement had all been carefully planned. I stared at them in disbelief and asked why they would do this to me. Adrian looked into my eyes without a hint of regret. "I never wanted you," he said. "I only wanted Ashwyn Corporation." Evelyn smiled as she stepped closer. "You were born with everything I wanted. Now it's finally mine." In that moment, my entire world shattered. The people I loved most had only been using me. Tears filled my eyes as I begged them to stop, hoping there was still some humanity left in them. But neither of them hesitated. Adrian took one final step toward me and with a single forceful shove, pushed me off the rooftop. As I fell through the freezing rain, I looked up and saw Adrian and Evelyn standing at the edge, watching me without a trace of remorse. I didn't pray to survive. I only wished for one impossible miracle. One more chance to live. One more chance to make them pay for everything they had done. Then the world around me disappeared into darkness. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't falling anymore. Instead of thunder and rain, warm sunlight streamed through a hospital window. For a moment, I thought everything that had happened was just a terrible nightmare. Confused, I looked around the unfamiliar room, trying to understand how I was still alive. My body felt weak, but there wasn't a single injury that should have been there after falling from a skyscraper. Nothing made sense. Then my eyes landed on the calendar beside my bed. I froze. The date wasn't today's date. It was exactly 3 years before the night I died. My heart raced as I grabbed the nearest mirror. Staring back at me was the same face I remembered, but it was younger. The exhaustion, the scars hidden behind my smile, and the weight of betrayal hadn't happened yet. I had somehow returned to the past. At first, I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking I was dreaming. But the more I looked around, the more I realized everything was exactly as it had been 3 years ago. My parents were already gone, but Adrian hadn't proposed yet. Evelyn hadn't betrayed me openly. Ashwyn Corporation was still mine. Fate had given me something I never thought possible. A second chance. I closed my eyes and remembered the rooftop. Adrian's cold smile. Evelyn's cruel laughter. The moment they pushed me into the darkness. The pain was still fresh, as if it had happened only seconds ago. But this time, I wasn't going to cry. The innocent Aria who believed everyone deserved her trust had died on that rooftop. The woman who opened her eyes in this hospital was someone completely different. I changed into the same clothes I had worn 3 years ago. The same white blouse. The same charcoal coat. To everyone else, I looked exactly like the old Aria Ashwyn. But inside, I was someone entirely different. The woman who trusted too easily had died on that rooftop. This time, I would trust no one. As I stepped out of the hospital, a black luxury sedan was already waiting for me. The driver greeted me with the same smile he had 3 years ago, completely unaware that fate itself had changed. Every familiar face, every familiar place, every moment felt like I was reliving a life I had already lost. Soon, Ashwyn Corporation came into view. Employees greeted me respectfully as I walked through the grand marble lobby. Some smiled, some bowed. None of them knew that the future they remembered had already changed. I wasn't returning to rebuild my old life. I was returning to rewrite it. That evening, the grand engagement gala was held just as I remembered. Luxury cars lined the entrance while the ballroom sparkled beneath enormous crystal chandeliers. Influential business leaders, celebrities, and powerful executives filled the room, celebrating what they believed was the perfect love story. Adrian stood near the entrance holding a bouquet of white roses, wearing the same confident smile that had once made my heart race. In my previous life, I would have run straight into his arms. This time, I walked past him without even slowing down. His smile disappeared instantly. Confused whispers spread through the ballroom as every guest watched the scene unfold. They couldn't understand why the woman deeply in love with Adrian suddenly treated him like a complete stranger. But high above the ballroom, someone else was watching. A mysterious man stood alone on the balcony, quietly observing everything that had just happened. Unlike everyone else, he didn't look surprised. A faint smile appeared on his face as his silver eyes followed me across the room. A faint smile appeared on his face as his silver eyes followed me across the room. At that moment, I had no idea who he was. I didn't know that our meeting would change everything. I had returned to the past to destroy the 2 people who betrayed me, but fate had already begun introducing new players into the game. And this time, I wasn't the only one hiding secrets. The ballroom fell silent. No one could understand what had just happened. The Aria they knew would never ignore Adrian. She would have smiled, accepted the flowers, and stood proudly by his side. But that Aria no longer existed. Confused whispers spread through the crowd as Adrian remained frozen, still holding the bouquet of white roses. For the first time, his confident smile disappeared. He couldn't understand why everything had suddenly changed. Before anyone could question it, Evelyn stepped forward with her usual graceful smile. She laughed softly and told the guests I was simply exhausted from work. Just like always, she covered for Adrian without anyone noticing. To everyone else, she looked like the perfect friend. But I already knew the truth hidden behind that innocent face. Every kind word, every comforting hug, every thoughtful gift had all been part of a carefully planned lie. I looked at Adrian for only a moment. His expression remained calm, but I could see the panic growing in his eyes. Things were no longer happening the way he expected, and for the first time, the hunter had become uncertain. High above the ballroom, a pair of silver-gray eyes quietly watched everything unfold. Lucian Vale stood alone on the balcony, saying nothing. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't watching the engagement. He was watching me. As if sensing his gaze, I looked up, and for a brief second our eyes met. He didn't smile. He didn't look away. His unreadable expression made it impossible to know what he was thinking. At that moment, I had no idea who he was or why he seemed so interested in me. I turned away and continued walking through the ballroom as the orchestra played, guests laughed, and champagne glasses clinked together. To everyone else, it was a perfect celebration. But to me, it was the beginning of a war. This time, I wouldn't wait for my enemies to make the first move. I would destroy their plans before they ever had the chance to destroy me, because revenge isn't won through anger. It's won through patience. And this time, I held every card they didn't know I had. My second life had only just begun. The next morning, I arrived at Ashwyn Corporation earlier than anyone expected. Every hallway, every office, and every familiar face reminded me of the life I had already lived once before. My assistants greeted me with warm smiles, completely unaware that I already knew which of them would remain loyal and which would eventually betray me. I quietly requested every financial report, every shareholder agreement, and every pending contract from the last 6 months. The executives exchanged confused glances. The old Aria would have trusted their summaries without question, but this time I wanted to see everything with my own eyes. Somewhere inside those documents were the first steps of Adrian's plan to steal my company. As I carefully turned each page, small inconsistencies began to appear. Unusual investments, missing approvals, tiny transfers that seemed harmless on their own but formed a dangerous pattern when placed together. In my previous life, I had overlooked them because I trusted the people handling them. This time, I saw exactly what they were. They believed they were secretly building a trap around me. What they didn't realize was that I had already escaped it once before. I closed the final file and allowed myself a faint smile. Adrian and Evelyn still believed they were several moves ahead. They had no idea I was already rewriting every move they were about to make. This wasn't just the beginning of my revenge. It was the beginning of their downfall.